Welcome to the OIC, otherwise known as the Omnipresent Information Connection podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Peterson.
And I'm the co-host, Noah Hansen. The Omnipresent Information Connection podcast is all about your world and your unique walk on this path called life. We present fascinating, life-changing information from around the world that has been validated. We also authenticate the information by providing you with links to where you can find out more about what we are talking about on our show. This podcast includes historically accurate, genuine facts that have helped shape our daily lives into what they are today. Man, I am so excited about this episode. This episode is going to further authenticate the last few episodes of the OIC podcast. And we're going to have the links in the description. Again, in every single episode, we'll have the links in the description that authenticate where we got information and where you can do further research into the topics we talk about it. So you don't just have to take our word for it. You can take the word of the scholars who discovered, of the scholars who are experts in their fields. So we are not only authenticating the possibility of an ancient flood happening, but we are authenticating the advanced technology of past human civilizations, ancient human civilizations.
Yes, we are.
I can just start it out by talking a little bit about Atlantis, because Atlantis was what I had mentioned at the end of the flood episode, what we had mentioned. And I know you know quite a bit about Atlantis. You've done quite a bit of research into that area of discovery. And the reason the ancient scholar who mentioned Atlantis in his writings, in two of his writings in particular, was the ancient philosopher in Greece, Plato. Now, we take so many of Plato's words seriously. We take so much of his philosophy seriously because it is legit. It's very structured in a way that is able to be applied in this day and age still. It's not just philosophy for their time, it's philosophy for all of humanity in all times. It's solid, it's structured, it's good, it works. Yet so many scholars don't take his writings on Atlantis seriously. Now, the reason for this being is the timeline that he gave Atlantis. And he said Atlantis was a civilization that existed 9,000 solar cycles before, or he just said 9,000 before his time, before his life. Now, what scholars in modern day are now saying is that he didn't mean 9,000 cycles of the sun. He actually meant 9,000 lunar cycles, which would actually place Atlantis at a legitimate point in time that scholars can agree that it could have definitely existed. And it wasn't metaphorical. He was talking, and he was very extensive on how he was talking about Atlantis. He wasn't talking about it as some folktale or some metaphor. He was talking about it like it was a real place. I don't know how much the listeners are versed in Atlantis and what is now coming out about Atlantis, but this is really interesting stuff, so I want to talk about Atlantis in this episode. Now, in this episode, I won't just be talking about Atlantis, though. Me and Kevin will be talking about the many different ancient civilizations, the fact that their tools, their techniques, and the way they did things was actually very advanced, to the point that we don't even know how they did it in this modern day. Even if they had our modern technology that we have today, some of the stuff that we're finding couldn't be replicated by us. We just don't have the tools that they did, apparently. And we'll go into that. And in later episodes, we'll be authenticating all of the things that we're talking about even further with more specific episodes, really digging deep into each one of the civilizations and the topics that we'll be mentioning in this episode, because I want to go over a bunch of things in this episode, because it's just, I did a lot of research just last night that just blew my mind. Every time I look into this stuff, it just blows my mind. It changes my whole perspective, because it's so interesting. I've learned to no longer expect what has been taught to me in the past, in the textbooks. So, Kevin, Atlantis.
Yes.
What do you think? What are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are very simple. Is that, a lot of people really are fascinated by Atlantis, and the Atlanteans is what they were called. And the whole premise, the whole reason why it's so fascinating is because they were the technological advanced race of people that helped be able to not only shape our oceans, our lakes, and our environment, but also helped to be able to create a foundation of protection against outside elements.
The story goes that the Atlantean sort of figure, the big guy in Atlantis, was Atlas.
Mm-hmm.
He is who Atlantis was named after.
Correct.
And Atlas was the Greek god of mapping, and so they were mappers. They had been doing extensive exploration to get a map of the entire Earth, of the continents. And we now know that the United States, and South America, as well as, the whole North and South continents, American continents, had maps. We had maps of these continents that were less accurate, obviously, with the technology of their time, but they were less accurate with their mapping technology, but they were there. They are on these maps from before Columbus's time.
There's constant maps. There's constant astrological writings. There's constant math. There's constant communication of celestial outpouring of information. And they were being able to literally sun track the Earth and the sky. And with this whole arrangement, we're able to come up with maps that would still be accurate if it wasn't for floods, if it wasn't for natural disasters and catastrophes.
This is amazing stuff. This is all so profound. The Atlantean civilization, when talked about by Plato, was located somewhere south of Spain. Somewhere just south of Spain is what he said. But there is actually evidence of the Atlantean civilization expanding all the way to the Caribbean, all the way to the Bahamas.
Yeah, you can say Caribbean or Caribbean, either way. Depends on your accent.
An amazingly advanced civilization that did tons of exploration, not only into Northern Europe, but all the way to the Americas, all the way to the North and South American continents.
Right, and they were navigators. You have to understand that Atlantis, they were navigators. And for some odd reason, they had a way to be able to accurately, to be able to carve out, to be able to trace on animal skin, actual land masses that still to this day you can be able to see in some museums.
Now, the ancient navigators is another whole topic we could do a whole nother episode on, because, there is the Eastern Island head guys, the people who navigated all the way to Hawaii and settled in Hawaii. All their navigating technology had to be advanced, and it was all based on the stars.
It had to come from a certain source.
What do you mean?
What I'm saying is that how does anyone come to grips or to terms with astrology, numerology, and other variant formats to be able to properly calculate one's life?
Right. And still being used to this day. It's been around for a long time.
So what I'm trying to say is that it was ancestral knowledge that was handed down from generation to generation. And during this particular point in life is that we were really immaculately spot on and being able to do things that now we no longer can. Like being able to put two rocks together, one on top of each other, without any air gaps, without any seams whatsoever, that it is so mathematically perfect that we, in all of our technology and our greatest computers in the world, struggle even trying to be able to come up with how that was done.
Right, it's so precise that it definitely wasn't done with, chisels. It couldn't have been. The perfection of these monoliths stacked on top of each other wouldn't be able to be so perfect if we were doing it with chisels, which cause a lot of imperfections.
And then another thing, for it to be mathematically perfect as well, is mind-boggling. And then on top of that, to be able to know that these structures, these places around the world, have withstood the test of time, even the Great Flood.
Mm-hmm. We'll have links in the description that show you this and that depict this, but one of these links, or a few of these links, will be the Gaia.com network, and that has a lot of wonderful information on it, especially about ancient civilizations. On top of that, they have a lot on astrology and numerology and things like that. Ancient knowledge passed down through thousands of generations. I can't wait for our future episodes on astrology. But for this episode, let's keep it going with these ancient civilizations, because a lot of people still are thinking these days that the ancients still were using, stone chisels and hammers to carve out these super intricate, solid granite statues and carvings and monoliths, stacking them up on top of each other in complete mathematical perfection. Not only that, but they were perfected in the way that they pointed. A lot of the ancient Egypt structures, for example, were pointed in one direction or another, like true north. The Sphinx was pointed directly towards the Leo constellation directly at the time.
Yep, and let me say this, is that all these great places that we're talking about are mathematically almost perfect. And what I mean is that when you're talking about true north, true south, and these buildings, how did they know specifically what authentically was true north?
Mm-hmm.
And then how do you be able to line up these stones? And then how do you create a building knowing what is true north, what is true south, and to have it stand the test of time?
Right, they had to have such intimate knowledge of the precession of the equinox and the tilt and the wobble of the earth going on that it's just mind-boggling that they had technology that was able to do this. And we could not replicate this technology until very recent modern times. We were able to finally map that out for ourselves.
And then it's still time-consuming, and it still requires a valued number of people to be able to get it done.
Mm-hmm. And it can't just be in one place. It has to be people working together all around the world to map this out.
Right, in harmony.
Right, in harmony. So it's amazing, absolutely amazing. And it also shows that there were people in ancient days that knew about different things that we couldn't possibly know about. I mean, you have the ancient Sumerians who have intimate knowledge of the Sirius star system, which we could not pick up with even modern telescopes until we had the Hubble. Right,
and then the Hubble is still suffering and struggling to this day because it can only go so far.
Yeah, it's absolutely shocking that how did they know about these star systems? You can't even see them in the night sky. It's not even a point in the night sky of light, but they knew that not only was there a main star in the Sirius solar system, but there were little ones, little white dwarfs that went around it, Sirius C and Sirius B.
Mm-hmm.
So it's absolutely amazing, the technology that they must have had in these days that is much more than the textbooks of modern days will say. And the textbooks in my first world civilizations class didn't teach about these things.
Right. And as we know throughout history is that when you're traveling from point A to point B, stars were often used as a form of a guide to be able to make sure that you're going in the right direction. So it's understandable that these people could be able to harness the stars to be able to then come up with true north and true south. But when it wasn't talked about, since there wasn't really a school system, since there wasn't a college, how did these people get this information?
Mm-hmm. Intimate knowledge of these things.
It was through travelers that came from other regions of the world being able to spread the news of what to do and how to do it.
So I'm going to mention something that's going to sort of authenticate that ancient civilization was much older than we have previously dated it. Now, there's one civilization in particular, one excavade in particular, that proves this. The dating of this civilization goes back over 11,000 years ago. And that's Göbekli Tepe. And that's thousands of years before we thought civilization even existed, even started. And Göbekli Tepe is located in Turkey, and that's the ancient Sumerian civilization that I had previously mentioned with the intimate knowledge of the Sirius star system.
Then on top of that, why is Turkey, of all places, have so many underground cities?
Mm-hmm. Indeed. And not only that, but the Mediterranean has a ton of different structures found underneath the water. And this is proof, even further proof, of an ancient flood. The sea levels rose to completely encompass, and now they're hundreds of feet underwater. Over 200 different sites found with different megaliths, with different carvings, with very precise carvings out of stone. It's
and
amazing.
Then where we allegedly believe, because we haven't been able to put a final flag spot
Verify this.
verified, but as far as the scientists, the archaeologists, and all these other great professional people basically have come very close. And the reason why they feel like they have come very close is because that is what is underneath the water is way more powerful as far as not only structures, but complete granite statues that are absolutely breathtakingly beautiful sitting underwater. And why? Because there had to be a world event, there had to be a catastrophe, there had to be something happen in order for that to be underwater today.
And like I said in the last podcast on floods, the one who discovered the Titanic, his name escapes me right now, but the man who discovered the Titanic, and he led that expedition, actually has mapped out the past shoreline of where the shoreline was before the flood. He's mapped that out. He's discovered where the water used to rise up to, and now it's hundreds and hundreds of feet above that.
Correct.
Above that line that he's mapped out. And this is the man who discovered the Titanic. So he's not just some small name out there.
And plus, he was one that was able to properly identify the size of the iceberg that the Titanic actually hit in the first place.
Yeah, so he's a very smart man. He knows what he's doing. You can trust what he says.
And we'll have that in the description below in the link in the video that you can be able to then watch after that.
That's right. So over 200 sunken cities in the Mediterranean. On top of that, we have a structure just north of the Mediterranean Sea, and this structure is called Cueva de Manga. And it's a burial chamber of what they think is an important chieftain of the time, and it's just north of the Mediterranean Sea, and covering this burial chamber, there's a 180-ton monolith. This was one giant rock that they somehow moved to get on top of this burial chamber. Now, even today in modern times, we need gigantic machinery that we didn't have until recent years to be able to move a megalith of that size. It's absolutely amazing. And the theories are many that go to try to theorize how they did this, how they moved these 180-ton megaliths in this case.
Even after all these years, because we know through just sidewalks, here's a perfect example, sidewalks, being able to not only get cracked, not only be able to become unlevel, but we have tripped on sidewalks. Mm-hmm. But to be able to have this huge, solid monolith, absolutely perfect in every way, and to be able to sink simultaneously at the same rate throughout the years to where it stays 100% level and plumb to its environment, it's just amazing.
Absolutely amazing. And this dates back to around 2500 BC, so 2,500 years before the time of Christ. It's impossible with the tech that textbooks say was available at the time. Absolutely impossible. So it must have been something else. They must have been more advanced than we have thought in past. So Göbekli Tepe dated over 11,000 years ago, and that's found in Turkey. 11,000 years ago. Now, in 1902, there's this technology that was found, and it was found in an ancient Roman shipwreck. And so you were talking about how sidewalks we can't even make level sidewalks to this day.
Right.
And the ancient Romans, they built these streets that are still more pristine than many streets that we have in modern times, that are still there. And the technology that they used to build these ancient Roman streets was advanced. So in 1902, a Greek shipwreck had a device that was found that had intricate gears on it, gears like clockwork.
Mm-hmm.
Hundreds of interconnected machines, and it made almost literally a computer. It was hundreds and hundreds of these machines all in one piece, and it's not that sizable of a piece of technology.
Correct.
It's about the size. It's a little bigger than my head. So hundreds of interconnected machines were found in this Roman shipwreck, this Greek shipwreck, and it's literally like a computer. Now, what theorists suggest is that this was a navigation device used for not only navigating but for as a sort of timekeeper, and it tracked star, solar, and lunar cycles.
Mm-hmm.
Simultaneously, all in one machine. This is something that is so advanced that it's just boggled the minds of every scholar that has been studying ancient peoples.
Yeah, because when you look at it, and even how it's constructed, even in the X-ray variant of what I've seen, is that everything is within a hair millimeter perfect of each other, like a clock, like a timepiece. Every piece is so intricate that it just becomes awe-inspiring. It becomes really like I'm just without words, because we have been taught in our school systems, we've been taught in college that we are the competent race, that we are the competent, rulers of today. Mm-hmm. But when in fact, being able to then find these discoveries, know that we're still behind from those people that were there in our yesteryear.
It's amazing. It's beyond anything that we've been taught in our school systems, and it's something that needs to start to be integrated in our textbooks, in our colleges, to keep us up to date with what's going on, what the real story of humanity's past is. Now, there's also signs that the Ice Age came to an abrupt stop, and there's theories about how that could happen, including a comet possibly landing with rock formations, or, the rock layer, this black rock layer that's found all throughout North America and Northern Europe, being an extraterrestrial type of rock, a rock that shouldn't naturally be there.
Correct, and understand that, we're not trying to go off on a wild tangent. The bottom line is that it came from space, and it was so big in its appearance that when it was breaking up, literally coming into the Earth's atmosphere, that it was big enough to be able to spread around the whole entire Earth.
So do you believe that that is the cause of the Noah flood, the big one?
Well, the Noah flood, was biblical, but there are other world catastrophes that have happened,
right,
and have been recorded due to what they now believe have been asteroids.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe it because the soil samples prove it. And that there's literally, when we say alien, we're not talking about, UFO stuff. We're talking about just unknown universe-type rock that we don't normally have on Earth,
right,
that has been scattered throughout the whole world for us to be able to examine and see.
Right, mineral recordings just found in the layers of sedimentary rock and other types of rock that are they shouldn't naturally be there. They're
Yeah.
not naturally sort of occurring. They had to have been deposited there by some giant crater, some giant comet.
Right. You know, like I would like to be able to know what formed the Grand Canyon.
Well, a lot of people say it was a Colorado River, don't they?
Right. Some huge body of water.
Right, so that goes back to floods too.
That goes back to floods too, right? And you have to understand is that, you know, the Earth has been constantly in flux, constantly evolving, constantly changing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so for there to be such a huge hole in the Earth and to be able to say it was just weather erosion is kind of a little bit not real informed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we know that weather played a factor in it. We know that water played a factor in it. But we also don't know conclusively what caused it in the first place.
So there, another ancient city that I can talk about is one that was discovered in the Grand Canyon. That the way the story goes, and it was published in a legitimate magazine way back in the 1900s, they excavated, they came across this ancient city carved into the side of the Grand Canyon. Now, this has been sort of pushed under wraps, and for some reason you can't find a lot on this civilization anymore. But the way the story goes is there was found in this ancient Grand Canyon city Egyptian hieroglyphics.
Yes.
Egyptian hieroglyphics in the Grand Canyon in the Southwest America. It's mind-boggling, but you can find information on this in the link in the description below. Now, all these things that we're talking about are just completely shattering to the modern scholars' worldview now. Like it's now anthropology is one of the most exciting fields because we are making all these discoveries and it's disproving what was put in the textbooks. Absolutely amazing. This is why I wanted to become an anthropologist in college.
Absolutely. And you have to understand that what goes into textbooks is what our leaders, our rulers, view comfortable enough to be able to put in there, because then it becomes a conspiracy theory. Then it'll become, this or that or anything else. But we should really, with our own intelligence, be able to present the information. And then when we have further knowledge, further discoveries, that we can keep putting it in there. But to be able to not have it be in there, that's uneducated leadership.
Right. They should at least mention the up-to-date discoveries that are being made and the theories that are being put out there and the conclusive evidence on top of that of an ancient flood. Because, you have these underground structures found in the Mediterranean, over 200 of them, not to mention all the ones in the Caribbean, north of Cuba, Havana,
right,
and all over the world, underneath the sea level. Mm-hmm. Now, they couldn't have sunk in the amount of time that they were dated back to. They could not have sunk in that amount of time naturally. It had to have been a flood. It had to. The sea levels had to rise.
Yeah, it had to be a catastrophic world event.
And Plato's word should be taken seriously when he talks so specifically about Atlantis, too.
Well, correct, because here's what we know. We know that it existed. We know that there was people that resided there, just like the Incas, just like the Mayans, just like all these other different races of people.
Right.
But the bottom line is that, where did they go? If they were removed from their environment, where did they go? And now, through DNA testing and other testing, we have, through our lineage, our heritage, and all that kind of stuff, have been able to find micro traces of foreign, what some people would call alien, DNA within us that isn't whole or complete, which means that we had to be able to then have bred with other people that we would have normally not have bred with to be able to become who we are today.
Right. It couldn't have been possible from passing down from, monkeys and apes.
Yep.
It couldn't have been possible for our DNA to naturally occur this way, to naturally be shifted to what it is today, without the inclusion of some sort of outside DNA source. It's not possible, and this is agreed upon by scholars in their respected fields. Now, we haven't even touched on the tubular drilling techniques that were found in ancient Egypt and other places that, it's equal depth, it's equally spaced ridges in these drill holes.
Yeah, mathematically perfect, almost.
And on top of that, the megaliths are so, like you said, level and perfect mathematically, that it's just mind-boggling the technology that they could have used. We haven't even touched on the tools being made to use this and where these tools are, because we find all these ancient structures, these monoliths that are carved out of hard granite that you can't just do with the technology that we previously thought they had. They had to have been done with drill bits, with drills tipped off with different jewels, different gems like diamond even would have to have been one to make it as perfect as it was. So it's absolutely amazing. We'll go into this in later episodes, and we can do a whole episode we can do many different episodes just on the ancient civilization of Göbekli Tepe, of ancient Egypt, the Giza Plateau, Turkey, ancient Greece, Rome, and Atlantis. We can do further episodes digging into those in future episodes, and we will do them. But for now, we just want to introduce all these different concepts, all these different discoveries, so that you are aware that there's more going on here. The ancient civilizations were more advanced. They are older than we had previously thought.
Yeah, and as far as being intelligent, wow, were they intelligent? Or wow, were they able to be receptive to other people's teachings? And when I say other people's teaching, it's because right now there is no information as far as who taught them how to be able to do these things. And that's the discovery of a lifetime.
Absolutely. On top of that, we can get into different tunnels that are discovered that go very, very deep into the earth, not only protected by indigenous cultures in South America and Central America, but we've got a picture, actually, that you can find of a tunnel on the back of the Sphinx.
Yep.
Going below the Sphinx. And we've got just all this different profound discoveries, these profound different excavates that have going on that are just mind-boggling. It's amazing. And it's coming out.
Yeah, and then the latest video that I saw on YouTube is that someone had electronically mapped out the whole Sahara Desert to be able to find that there's other pyramids that are completely covered up with sand that we didn't even know that existed until that happened. Now, that's going to be on another episode, but that's just mind-boggling as well, to be able to know that there's pyramids in the oceans, to be able to know that there's pyramids on top of mountains, to be able to know that there's pyramids under sand and in sea.
Here's one more thing. Here's to make it a whole level deeper. These pyramids, what they've now discovered, actually line up with the Earth's ley lines, the electromagnetic grids. They are actually placed at certain energy points in the Earth, points of high energy. And we'll go into depth in another episode on what exactly I mean by this. But the ley lines, if you're familiar with them, pyramids are often put at points where these ley lines meet in many areas. Now, on top of that, we've got Antarctica that we haven't even talked about in this episode. Underneath all the ice in Antarctica that's now melting and making way for not only dinosaurs, but many different structures of evidence of an ancient people.
Yeah, that people actually existed underneath the ice for hundreds, if not thousands of years.
Right. So I look forward to that episode. I cannot wait for all these different, because we're going to get in depth to all these things. So look forward to that.
This has been another life-enhancing, authenticated podcast aired by the OIC and brought to you by the faithful OIC sponsors and contributors. Please tune in every week and subscribe to our podcast. And while you're there, explore our website with all the posts, videos, and podcasts that we have created with you in mind. While you're on the journey through our website, you will see our Patreon page where you can become a faithful contributor yourself with the freedom to be a part of our team today. Thank you.